Welcome to another Horror Franchise Wednesday. Let's talk about Tremors 4. The Legend Begins. This came out in 2004, stars Michael Gross, once again as Gummer, except not Bert, because this is a prequel 100 years prior to the events of Part 1. Like exactly 100 years before. It's 1889. The first one was filmed in 1989, so yeah, this is 100 years before, and it's basically back to basics. It's this one's the closest to Part 1 in tone and just only having the graboids. So I think that's why I really liked this one. I think this is one of the better sequels so far. I'll save my thoughts on 5 and 6, but going off of 1 through 4, a lot of people said 4 was like the worst, 3 and 4 are the worst. It just keeps getting worse and worse. I think not. I think 4 is probably the best sequel, next to Part 2. Maybe, I don't know. I can't decide right now, but I'll decide when I rank these. But 2 and 4, they're competing for best sequel for me right now. I really liked this one. I don't get all the hate's all about, but yeah, sue me. I liked Tremors 4. It was pretty fun. So let's get into it. Let's go into the negatives, I guess, because I don't really have a whole lot of complaints here outside of maybe just some CGI shots. But let me tell you something. The CGI in this movie, it's not anywhere near as jarring, and noticeable and laugh-inducing as Part 3. With the whole ass blasters thing, I'm glad that there's not so many CGI shots in this one. Like, the visual effects and crap in Part 3 were just so awful. In this one, there was way more practical versus the CGI. Yes, there's some, but it's not just every other shot is CGI. Like, there's a lot of practical and dummy work in here. Like, not dummy, but like hand puppet shit and stuff. I prefer that 100 times more than CGI any day of the week. There is some shaky acting, like the acting's not top notch or anything, but I will say that Michael Gross is definitely one of the better performances in this movie. And the actor Drago, is that his last name, who plays like Black Can Kelly in this one, they're pretty good. But there's some other characters in this movie where their acting's a little shaky, but it's a straight to DVD, creature feature, 4 movies into a franchise. You're not going to get the best acting, but again, if I'm going to compare this to like 2 and 3, when it comes to acting from the side characters, I think this one's not as bad as those. And my last nitpick, I guess, would just be that there's not a whole lot of comedy here. I could have used a little bit more humor in it. 2 and 3 were getting more and more silly. This one dialed it back, kind of went more for the tone of the first movie, which is fine, but the comedy wasn't really all that funny in the movie. There's a couple of humorous moments, but not a whole lot, not enough. So should have dialed that up a little bit more. I think the rest was pretty good. All positives from here on out. I really like what they did with the character of Gummer. I like that he's no longer the one-note gun lover. He's the polar opposite in this one. Not saying there's anything bad with that version of Bert. I love that version of Bert, but 3 movies in a row, it's like, how many times are we going to do this? Let's change things up a bit. So we show a whole new side. I'm sure Michael Gross loved that opportunity. Finally I get to play something different. And I love it. Just him being the opposite. He doesn't use guns. He doesn't know how to operate them. He pays other people to use guns for him. He's a rich asshole in this one. And he has like an arc, the typical arc, where by the end of it, he's going to be using guns. And now he's in love with them by the end of it. Like, he's using that Gatling gun, cranking it. But yeah, like, there's a lot more of a character arc in here. There's more character arcs in this movie than the other ones. And there's a lot more story in this movie. Like in the other ones, in 2 and 3, the story is, they get hired to go kill graboids. There you go. That's the story. In this one, there's a little bit more motivation behind killing these monsters. Like, he's got this mine. His father put all this money and investment into the mines. It's all he's got. So when, the graboids are gumming up the works, he's got to hire Black Can Kelly. There's just a lot more going on in this movie story-wise. You got this guy who has a ranch, and, these people are trying to start a store, and, these people just fled from China. They just want to defend their turf. It's a movie about a community getting together and just fighting for their land. So I like this story. I like all these characters. There's not an unlikable character in here, so that was a huge plus. I really like all these people. No one was ever really annoying. In 2 and 3, there was always like one character that I thought was slightly annoying. I didn't have that problem in this one. So there you go. Another thing that's great. And I thought this movie did a good job making it look like it was the late 1800s. And I love that this movie had way more practical effects compared to 2 and 3, especially 3. There's a lot more graboid action in this one. We don't have to share screen time with shriekers or ass blasters. It's just the graboids. And we get introduced to another uh, form of graboid, the baby ones. I think they're called like dirt dragons or something. They got a couple names like shooters or whatever. They jump out of the ground, which I like that because it kind of adds, more of a threat, because now the option of going high up somewhere isn't really an option no more. You can go on top of a rock, but these things seem to jump pretty high up that they could take your ass off that rock if they wanted to, if they knew where to go. I mean, they don't have eyes, so if you're on the rock and you're being silent, they don't know that you're there, right? So, which is kind of funny. Like they can jump out of the ground pretty high, and in the open they just get on top of a rock. Like let's get to high ground, let's get on the rock. It's like why? They can jump, they can still get you. And the movie clicks along at a good pace. I wasn't ever really bored. So yeah, I had a good time with this one. So final thoughts, I think this is a pretty good prequel. There's not a whole lot of good prequels out there. I'm not a prequel guy, but this is one that I actually really like. And I like going back to perfection, seeing the origins of the Chang store, seeing all these characters and them defending their turf. It's got some good practicals. I like this new version of Gummer. It's completely different, and I like that. It's a fresh take. So when it comes to Tremors 4, I think that this is a underappreciated sequel in this franchise. So if you're a fan of the first one, I think this is the closest to it in tone. So go out and buy it. Alright, now let's dig a little deeper into this movie. Spoilers! Alright, so 1889. That's not really a spoiler, but yep, this is 1889, and right away we see these people like digging in the mines, and this guy gets like lifted up. He's beheaded. We actually get to see his body like fall down, see the neck hole, everything for a couple of seconds. That was like pretty awesome. I did not expect that at all. And we see that the town's called Rejection. I'm not sure who voted on that name. Like, was there even a town vote for that? Like, all in favor of Rejection? No, I reject that name. I like really Rejection. Good name, and it's like an apt name because everybody's leaving. Like they reject this town, so bye bye. And we see the origin of the town. We see Chang's store, and I guess this is like what the great grandfather of Chang in the first one, and is the what's his face? I don't know his name. The guy who says "Gracias, amigo" like 7 times in the movie. Is that supposed to be like the great grandfather of the character in part 1? What was his name? Miguel? Is that his ancestor? I mean, they just all conveniently, you know, each generation stayed in the same shit town. I mean, that's kind of hard to believe. There's a callback to part 2 in here where Gummer is like, I feel like I've been denied some critical information. The little kid gives Bert, or not Bert, I forget his name, something weird. Gummer. He gives him his slingshot, and typically you're thinking, like, oh, that's going to come into play, right? He's going to use it, he's going to kill a graboid or one of the things in their mouth with it, or it's going to help him out, get him out of a shitty situation or something. But no, it never happens. He never uses that slingshot once. I might have missed it, but I highly doubt it because I was looking at the screen the whole time and I never saw it happen. I mean, maybe when I was taking a note, he quickly used the slingshot and I was like, oh, I missed it. He never used his slingshot once, and they even show it at the hotel later on when he like flees town. He's given up. That typical situation in a lot of movies where they just like, I give up, and then they leave, and then they're in trouble. He has a change of heart. It's the typical change of heart moment in the movie. Still love the movie. I'm just pointing it out. It's kind of a cliche. They always leave, and then something happens. They're like, oh, I gotta go back. I gotta help out. But he brings the slingshot with him to the hotel, and you're thinking again, like, oh, there's that slingshot. He's gonna use it at some point. Nope, never does. And then they see empty eggs, just like in part 2 or 3. We were introduced to the eggs, and we get like this graboid attack at the campfire. And it's like this one guy gets like thrown in the air and he gets like hit twice. So then they put out like a message, like we need some, quick draw people, whatever they're called. People who are good at, quick draws. Is that what it's called? When you quickly get your gun? Quick draw. They put out a message, and realistically, it takes like over a month for someone to get there, and only one person responded to the call. Just Black Can Kelly. One person showed up. He's like, price negotiable, and only one person showed up. Okay, and it took him a month to get there. And Black Can Kelly, he's probably my favorite character in the movie. Like, he's just awesome. He's that badass. And there's a funny moment in the movie, and where you think he's gonna shoot the apple, and he doesn't. And then they actually like take this scene and do it again in part 7, but they actually shoot the apple, where the chick puts the apple in the guy's head and she shoots it with the bow and arrow. So it's like that scene was taken right out of here, except in this one he doesn't shoot the apple. He's like, what, you thought I was going to shoot it? And then there's a little callback to part 1 where, when Kevin Bacon sees the hat on the ground, he lifts it up, there's a severed head underneath it. In this one, you think that's going to happen again. He picks up the hat off the ground, there's no head, and then the camera like tilts up and there's like a head in the background. So that was a neat, cool little callback to part 1. Then we get this whole long like scene in the barn. They're camping out there. Somehow the graboids knew they were in there, despite the fact that they're sleeping, laying still. I don't know, they weren't snoring or anything, but they somehow knew they were there, so now they're like taking one floorboard at a time so they can, get closer and closer to them, and it's like the walls are closing in, but it's like the ground is closing in, I guess. I don't know. They're just taking the floorboards away, which I thought was kind of cool. And then unexpectedly, like, Black Hand Kelly gets killed, and there's like over 30 minutes left in the movie. It's like, oh shit, like the main badass is now dead, and you would expect him to pull like a Burt in part 2 or 3, and like where you think maybe, oh, they're gonna chainsaw him out just like in 3. Nope, he's dead. He's not coming back. I like that shot once they're fleeing over the bridge. You can see underneath it the graboid goes from one side to the other. Just and then of course, Gummer leaves, and then he comes back once he finds out that they're in trouble. He brings supplies. He's got this like giant like duck shooting gun, which is a real fucking thing. What's it called? Like a punt gun? Is that what they called it? Where it's like its purpose is to shoot like multiple ducks at once. I guess it has like a big spread. And despite like how huge it is, when the first graboid shows up, he like shoots right past it somehow. It's just funny. And then we get like this Creep Show 2 wooden Indian, and I thought it would have been awesome if it just came alive and started killing the graboids. This movie could have been supernatural. I wouldn't have minded. It would have been awesome. But yeah. And I like that the graboid eats the wooden Indian, like mistaking it for the other guy, and the other guy kept saying, like, it looks just like me. I guess it does. Although they're blind, so they wouldn't know. The graboids didn't mistake it for him because it looks like him. They're blind. It just so happened to be there, and the graboids ate it on accident. And then they build a bomb, and I guess they planted it on the front of this big old giant piece of machinery. I don't know what it does. It does something with like a well. It like reels things in, and they planted the bomb on the front because they tie this thing to the graboid and they reel it in, and once it like taps the piece of machinery, it just blows up. It's not like they shot it, so that's what they did, because I didn't see a bomb on it. So I'm guessing what they built, because they like show you the process of them like making this bomb. They get the gunpowder, they're like smoothing it down. There had to be a purpose for it, because I didn't see like anything else to like, no other bombs, no dynamite. I didn't see them stick it on the thing. That was it, right? That was the bomb. I'm so confused by that. It confused me in the moment. It's like, what blew it up? I don't know. You'll let me know in the comments below. But yeah, I guess that's what they did. They just duct taped the bomb before duct tape was a real thing to the thing. But I do have to call bullshit, like, when they're reeling that graboid and like one of the tongues is like wrapped on the Asian kid's arm, and we know how strong their grip is, like pulling it, like it would have ripped that little kid's arm off. All right. And if this movie had some balls, they would have done that. This movie would go up a point if they ripped that little kid's arm off, but instead, like, the tongue like rips in half. Like, that's not what would happen. And then I like that moment where like the Indian guy, I don't know what his name is, but he puts the saw on the ground, and then it gets, the graboid runs right into it and saws it right in half. That was pretty cool. And Then they renamed the town to Perfection, which you knew that was going to happen at some point because of part 1, duh, but you knew that's how the movie was going to end. Like, they're going to repaint it Perfection, yeah. And then they, like, swear an oath, they make a pact, like, we're not going to speak about this to anybody, otherwise no one's going to come live here, which makes sense. That's why nobody in part 1 knows about it. It's a shock to them. Like, what the fuck is this? So I like that. That makes sense. And then Gummer gets the Gatling gun, and he's, like, loving it. So that's, like, his full arc now. He goes from not knowing about guns, not having one, to loving them. He has a whole Gatling gun that he's just shooting all these bottles with. And the slingshot was never used. I wrote that down. When was the slingshot used? Was it? I don't think it ever was. But yeah, there you go. I did read that one of the guns that they use in this movie was not even in existence yet in 1889. So that was a little goof that they made. So yeah, there you go. Good time. If I had to pick a favorite character, Hockey Mask Award for best character, I guess we'll go to Blackhand Kelly, because he's just the badass character. He's got some pretty cool lines. Just because you're fully grown doesn't mean you're a man. And the clap award for best scene is the whole them setting up the trap at the end, using the punt gun to blast a hole in that graboid. All that stuff was pretty fun. So that was the best scenes, that whole ending there. Those are my thoughts on Tremors 4. What are your thoughts on this movie? Put all your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining tonight. If you like what you see, you can hit this like button and become a Patreon for as little as $1 a month to request movie reviews. And you can become a subscriber today just by clicking on my cartoon face in about 5 seconds. And until next time, Auf Wiedersehen.